everyone, and welcome to the River Falls Public Library. Tonight we have Earth Households, a reading of poetry and prose in observance of Earth Day and National Poetry Month. And our readers tonight are Maureen Ash, Thomas R. Smith, and Ted Tollefson. And after that, we'll open it up for a short open mic session. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention a couple library programs coming up. Actually, right now we have the All School Art Show down here in the gallery, which is running through May 2nd. And there's a lot of great stuff by the kids there. Come and check it out. Our spring book sale is going on in the lobby through May 11th. A week from Saturday, May 4th, from 10 to 2, we've got free comic book day coming up. You can stop in and grab 2 free comics while supplies last. And we have some more earth-friendly stuff coming up. We've got Apple Tree Care with Diana Alfuth on May 7th, and Learn to Plant Your Own Small Veggie Garden on May 21st. And finally, Chia Gunza Vang is going to do a virtual program called Dreamer's Dream about the story of a Hmong refugee who escapes communist Laos at age 17 and moves to Wisconsin. So yeah, stop in for any of those events. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Thomas R. Smith.
All right, thanks, John, and thanks to anybody that's out there watching us now or later. We're glad to be here tonight. We are 3 poets and writers who have been working on Earth related themes for a long time, probably at least as long as there's been an Earth Day. I'm just going to do a blanket introduction to the 3 of us who are the feature readers, and then after that, I notice we have many fine poets volunteering to come up and contribute to the open mic. So we'll deal with those introductions as they come. So our first reader is going to be Maureen Ash of River Falls. She writes that she has loved horses, being outside, and writing about both for most of her life. Her memoir, Holding the Lines, Horses, Hard Work, Love, and Potatoes, was published in late 2023. And we have copies back here, by the way, for sale after the reading. It's about her family, their farm, and the horses who powered it. Maureen also writes poems, very good poems, and bakes bread. I'm the second reader, Thomas Smith. I've published a lot of poems on environmental themes, and I'll have a couple of my books back here too. I'll talk about them later on, so I'm not going to waste breath right now. But I'll just say that I happened to be here in River Falls in 1970 to celebrate the very first Earth Day. So I am an Earth Day, if not pioneer veteran. More on that later. Ted Tollefson, Reverend Ted Tollefson, has served as Unitarian Universalist minister in Minnesota and Wisconsin since 1980. His first book of poems, Household of Joy, was published last year. And Ted says that he's still waiting on copies from the printer, but we'll have a little sign-up sheet where you can order one if you like. I recommend it. It's a terrific book. It's his first book, and he'll have a new book of poems coming out in the fall. He lives with his wife, Kristen, and dog, Boomer, in Frontenac, Minnesota, and still preaches occasionally at the UU Society of River Falls. For him, poetry is often a prayer to the spirits of place. So that's the drill here. Us 3 will come up and read about 20 minutes apiece, and then we'll open it up to the open mic. And I think we have several fine contributors for that. Meanwhile, let's welcome Maureen Ash.
Thank you for coming out. I'm going to start by reading a little bit out of this book, the kind of a memoir. And this is a little section about a very cold night. For all the counting back we did, all the figuring and reckoning, We could not figure out how and when Dinah got pregnant as one of our horses. That time the stallions got out in the night, that had to have been it. Dinah's udder was swelling, and Jemima, another horse, had a big belly on her. Winter foals were a bad idea. We never wanted a foal born in winter when it could so easily freeze. But here was Dinah waxing on a day when the temperature was well below zero. And the temperature that night was to fall between 30 and 40 degrees below zero. This was a while ago before. One of us would have to stay in the barn with her. Richard grew up in California. Decades in Minnesota and Wisconsin had hardened him, but his nose still froze easily, and he simply avoided, when he could, cold weather. I was the better insulated one. I accept that. I liked being with foaling mares, and I was used to the cold. We agreed that I was the one who should sleep in the barn that night. So it was that I went out into the darkness with a hot water bottle and 2 sleeping bags, dressed as if to hike in Antarctica. I turned on the light over Richard's workbench so I'd be able to see Dinah in the dimness of her foaling stall. I patted her nose and looked her over, taped her tail loosely, and then fitted one of the sleeping bags into the other and worked them into a recess I'd made in the hay. I slid the water bottle down to the foot of the bags and slid myself in after. It wasn't so bad, especially after the cats found me and curled around my head and neck. I was good at falling asleep in the barn by now. Before long, I was waking up, the sound of water falling. Dinah was peeing. Back to sleep, then awake again. This time Dinah was up to something. I wriggled out of my warm slot and saw her back arched, steam rising from her sides. I ran to the house and called up the stairs for Richard, who answered quickly that he'd be right there. Then back to the barn, where Dinah was lying down, then getting up. Richard arrived with the bag we'd packed full of towels, an electric hairdryer, and the Novosan I now used to treat the navel. The foal's hooves protruded, and we watched it being born, leaving Dinah to handle it on her own. Once the foal was mostly out, though, we slipped into the stall and began drying it. As the towels became wet, we slung them over the stall gate, where they froze instantly stiff. Richard plugged the hairdryer into the cord we'd stretched out in preparation earlier that day and blew warm air onto the foal. Dinah was great, lying still and letting us work, keeping the umbilical cord intact so the foal could get the benefit of her warm blood a bit longer. It was a filly we saw as we worked over her. She had a dramatic blaze, as clean and white as it would ever be again in her life. She grew encouragingly impatient with our ministrations and wanted to get up. We stepped back, Richard ready with the hairdryer to get any exposed wet fur once she was up, and let her wobble and plop and work her way up onto her stout but shaky legs. From there, it wasn't far to Dinah's udder and a good, long, noisy suck. Richard and I had almost forgotten how cold it was. The relief of seeing Dinah and her foal warmed us momentarily, at least. But before long, our faces were burning with cold, and we decided to leave mare and foal alone for a couple of hours. In bed, we held each other till we'd warmed ourselves and the sheets. We smelled of foaling, a scent as distinctive and clinging, I have found, as chlorine from a swimming pool. In the little warm pod we made, we held between us our hope for that filly, so new out there in the freezing barn. She was fine in the morning, full of milk, beginning to frisk. The weather remained barbarously cold. I sewed a blanket for her, using the materials I used to make warm hats and mittens for the kids. A red nylon outer shell, a blue fleece lining, 2 layers of quilt batting as insulation, and gold, corduroy, and Velcro for the straps to keep it on her. The low that night had been 38 degrees below zero, but we decided not to be too hung up on exactitude and named the baby 30 below Elaine. In her new blanket, she looked adorably silly, an unlikely superhero. It really did look like Superman cape. A month later, in warmer weather, Jemima foaled without drama. Her colt was small and squarely built. Marion, our daughter, named him Blue, which she said was a good name for a winter baby. So I'm going to read some poems because it's a poetry reading. This one, I worry about that it's too saccharine and schmaltzy, but I'm going to try it out on you. It's called While Snowshoeing. I saw how a small creek was muffled in snow, like a child being kept safe from the cold, and the trees beside it were weighty with their charge to manage the child, if manage means love and protect. I saw how the blown snow, so deep everywhere this winter, had left respectful curves like cathedral apses around the trunks of the trees, and the trees' shadows threw themselves across the laps of the drifts like gray blue knitted shawls against the cold. Under mounded blankets, the sleepy creek rubbed its bowed cheek on the feet of the sheltering trees, and I turned away, careful as if not to awaken a baby. The world is always breaking my heart or binding it up, sometimes in one scene or one act. And I remember again, it's an old story, this fragile one of love. Sometimes I write river poems, and this one's called The River Starts Her Day. She loves how the light stirs itself into darkness, a cup now of morning and the taste of fall clouds. Now gathers what she'll need for the day, dapples and shadow, froth for the rapids, all manner of shine. Always this morning rush in the cool time when sun knocks like a timid neighbor, hi, just wondering, and has not yet barged into the sky. Oh, how she loves this job, her belly in the earth and her back a second sky where the birds fly twice. Clouds examine themselves and brush rain from their shoulders. The little girl lazing on a dock reaches down to touch the daytime moon. Mm. And this is a poem about a place on the farm where I grew up that we loved, really loved, and I have never gone back to after this North Pasture. There was a little stream. There was a little stream that ran in spring from the swamp above the woods, through the woods, and down a slight grade to the pond. We loved that little creek, the way it bravely set out as the snow melted, weaving wide-eyed among the trees, clear pools forming now and then over last fall's leaves, and then a rivulet escaping to make a small waterfall over an exposed root, the smooth drape of it falling to make a low sound of water on stones. But I loved best where the creek left the trees and slid down a fold in the pasture, and I could see the brown grass, combed by this small current, waving under the water. For whatever reason, this was springtime to me. After my father graded the swamp so the water drained faster and he could plow that land, the creek was all business, did not care to be loved. It just had to funnel water to the pond. No more shy twists to get around trees. No more wavering grass underwater like the earth's tawny fur. That was all kid stuff, and this was the future. Dad plowing hard, and the creek running fast. Mm. This is called Early Spring Farm Walk. Autumn speaks through the spring. See the garlic sticking an exploratory finger through straw as if testing the air. And this field where the turnips lie, as if hailed onto the gummy dirt, squeezed out of the soil by frost. Such a cover crop as deer dream of, and me, having loved all winter watching them scrape for turnips under the snow. Rye coming up in this field, good to see it so green and spreading, planted after the beans came off. And now the prairies, dry rustle of husks and brown grass that will be burned this year, flames leaping up just as this couple of mallards jump from the pond as I pass. I love this trail on the ridge's broad spine where the passing winds lift me and yet lace me down, where I pass a bare, raw spot. We buried the yearling colt in November after his baffling illness and suffering ended, gave him to this place we love and love more now for his place in its future, his fine, patient heart beating strong through the land. This is Farm Truck. Well, we're spending a rainy morning in the truck, Mr. and Mrs. Old Farm couple, driving to buy seed and visit my niece, bundling the trips to save on fuel. Spring and a light rain, corn poking up like rows of lit matches, burning green out of the ground. Today's drizzle like gasoline to their little flames. Just weeks till this countryside is torched with corn. Windshield wipers flop and rest, flop and rest. One work glove curls on the floor, fingers flexed as if it still wants to grip the pliers or twine. Toolbox, a tarp to cover the seed once we've bought it, a railroad spike we use sometimes when hauling a hay rack. On the freeway, we putz in the slow lane, passed in flumes of spray by cars and tightly muscled newer pickups, almost perky in their powerful lines. The long crack in our windshield shines silver as our hair. Not far now. This is the last one, called Riverside Beauty Parlor. Another river poem. Hundreds of years I've styled these rivers, done their hair, heard their stories, kept the secrets they've managed to whisper when I'm fitting the dryer dome onto their always tilted heads. The young, fast ones want highlights that shine on the rocks. The older ones smile to remember those days and ask only for some sort of rolling wave. My client eddies in the chair. I let the aired smock drift down, button it, lift her heavy, wet hair. Our eyes meet in the mirror. Ready? And nothing has been cut or combed or curled. We're just embarking as if from a spring or a body of water. Her journey is mine for the time it takes, and then she moves on. This is my work, beauty and confession, mine now to you, that I do so love this world. Thank you.
Let's see. My name is Thomas R. Smith. I think I know most of you, if not all. I'm going to start out with with an Irish poem that I like to do this time of year. My friend Tony in Dublin sent this to me, and Tony, I know you'll be hearing this sooner or later, so this is for you. It's by the contemporary Irish poet Brendan Kennelly, and it's called "As April Begins." April is a generous month, she said. Generous rain, light singing birds. Even a mean heart acknowledges the bond linking grass to clouds, linking what we know of here to the blue tingling world of beyond. I've seen mean hearts turn generous, so why should I limit myself to being only what I think I know when I might dream of another me? The year is taking shape. So am I. I think I'll go for a stroll with hope. When I walk through the April light, I see a gentle twig is more durable than a stubborn tree. It's Brendan Kennelly. Thank you. Okay, so this one is a nod in a way to Earth Day. We all know that we owe Earth Day largely to our great U.S. Senator Gaylord Nelson. But in the background of Gaylord Nelson's work to create Earth Day was Rachel Carson's 1962 environmental warning called Silent Spring. So this was something that got under Gaylord Nelson's skin. So it's in the background of Earth Day, therefore. Rachel Carson has become a hero of mine for a long time now. So this is a poem called Rachel Carson. The heart of nature saves nothing in the name of sentiment. In the sea, it all comes down to eating. One flashing life, ingesting another, and in turn becoming food for some larger life. Where many see only the red rule of tooth and claw, Rachel Carson recognized a beauty better described than defined. In writing about it, conveyed the mood of a vast dynamic energy exchange more than the sum of its constituent organisms. And behind that glittering, shifting tapestry, Kali devouring and giving birth to herself. From the view of a single limited mortal life, it's as alien as the self replenishment of the sun, phoenix like life giver in its burning. Rachel Carson understood, and that understanding strengthened her against the terrifying, relentless attack on her body by the cancer dealing forces she exposed in Silent Spring. It must be that the bravery with which she faced and named her destroyers helped her write with such fearless grace and empathy of the myriad sea lives of which she was one, and you and me, bright, fugitive as the reflections of stars in water. Thank you. And I should note, if you're only familiar with Silent Spring, that's not Rachel Carson's best writing by a long way. Her books about the sea are just absolute beautiful gems. I'd recommend starting with her first one, Under the Sea Wind. It's a fabulous book. Good summer read. I'm gonna read a few poems from a book of prose poems that was published in late 2018. I didn't get much of a chance to read from it at public readings because the pandemic happened. So I'm kind of making up for that now. There are a lot of kind of earthly poems in this book. The prose poem form is sort of kind of halfway between regular prose and the singing of lined poetry. So it's kind of on the about the middle of the scale between speaking and singing. So not quite as musical as regular poetry, but still it has its own music. So this is called This Abundance, and it was It was written back when Obama was president. Small screens diminish the world, I think. Driving my 96-year-old mother past farms near her home on a morning in what has so far proven an atypically mild November. Wooded hills and swamps alternate with fields, all harvested by now. Geese forage the corn stubble, not yet convinced it's time for them to leave. Homes variously kept up or neglected. Say how well or not each farm family is doing. We crest a gentle rise to view a clipped pasture vividly green, bordered by bristling bare trees that make a kind of spiky, hairy barrier between earth and dry blue sky. Deep in the thickets is an unperturbedness, acquiescence to what comes. My mother still knows every turn of the road better than I do. I depend on her not to get us lost. No one complains about the weather, but there's something unsettling about this continuing moderation. This is the North Country, not known for its moderation. But all that's immoderate here today is opinion. On Main Street, barstool pundits badmouth Obama and agree that climate change is a leftist hoax. I love these back roads through scrub woods that hold so much of the rugged, persistent wildness of the land in them. Since childhood, they have occupied my imagination. What has happened to the imagination of others? The country is large, and their world small, shrinking along with the screens. Many have never lived outside this abundance and simply can't imagine anything could threaten it. Thank you. Um, so, prose poems. There was a book I really loved and was fascinated by in childhood. It was a book made from a series that Life magazine ran called "The World We Live In." Anybody remember that? Anybody know that one? It kind of tried to cover everything, from the beginning of life to present times. And there was a kid's version of it that I had. So this is called "The World We Live In." In a friend's house, I reacquaint myself with the Life Special Edition for young readers. Copyright 1956. I was 8, just the right age for poring over Chesley Bonestell's paintings of the wastes of Mercury and the double star Beta Lyrae, bound together by rings of crimson hydrogen. Almost every photo and illustration, memorized in minute detail, leads me into reverie these many years later. Imagine the world we live in. But is it? It's true that the trilobite fossil dozes on and has not yet awakened. Cumulus clouds, composed of some of the same atoms as those in the photos, shake their electric fists at dry trees on stormy summer days. But not a single one of the bass, squid, katydids, coyote, sea anemones, opossums, kangaroo rats, king snakes, or caribou pictured in these pages is still alive. This book of dreams is also a book of the dead. Not quite the world we live in anymore, though one resembling it, a seed world from which the present world has grown, a world the book's authors hoped the child reading would feel a part of, and maybe a little because of them. He did. The world we live in. You, you can still find used copies of that. I've got one. So I made sure to get one. Um, Well, there's a certain kind of prose poem that's known as an object or a thing poem, and it was developed by the French 20th century French poet named Francis Ponge. And the method of this kind of poem would be, you pick up something just very ordinary, like a stone, a stick, or I don't know, like a nutshell, and you just kind of open up a channel between yourself and the object and see what kind of communication goes back and forth. So I've written a lot of these, and something kind of magical happens too. Ponge said that this is true in true French fashion. Ponge said that the poem then became the child of a marriage between the poet and the object being studied. So you could look at this as a child of that process. I like that. It's got eros in it. So this is called shells inside a shell. I pick up half a black walnut shell. It's lain here for a season, emptied by a squirrel during the dry summer. Its outside curvature is a shaggy ship's hull, dyed the dark black brown of the winter sea it's about to embark on. Turning it over, I discover inside it two of the tiniest snails I've ever seen. The size of seed beads, their coiled shells are a delicate pale pink, translucent as a fingernail of the unborn. One each clings to the walls of two grooved chambers in the walnut shell, unseen pockets of some other earth, which is also our earth, where these seedling snails find protection from birds and other predators. They are so small and curled in on themselves, so much in their dream, that they bring to mind the soul washed pale and pink by the blue black flood of oblivion in Lawrence's Ship of Death. Is it possible our soul is so small and delicate? Can it be that our whole life takes place inside half a walnut shell? Holding this tiny world in my hand, I feel vulnerable and unworthy. What right have I to interrupt their journey? Carefully, I turn the shell over and set it back down in the wan late autumn grass where the snail's little ship can get on with its voyaging. The ragged firmament closes over them once more, their sails rosy on the hard gray waves carved inside the black walnut shell. Ooh, all right. There's that wonderful D.H. Lawrence poem, one of the last ones that he wrote called The Ship of Death. It's kind of a masterpiece. It's a fantastic vision of going through and beyond the death process. Okay. I'm going to read a couple more. Um, I'm I'm kind of into doing this, doing from this book. So I'm gonna read two more. Uh, I've got copies of it back there. Windy Day at Cabacona, prose poems, new and selected prose poems. Let's see. So this isn't quite an earth poem, but it's a life poem again. It's called Daylight Nation. The minister, though well-meaning, talks too much about heaven. It takes a minister to laugh at that one. The minister, though well-meaning, talks too much about heaven and not enough about the man who has died. My memories of my old professor are warm but sparse, giving my mind latitude to wander. I imagine the dead man asking, "Did you make it to my funeral?" If a person answers no, the dead man then says, "Okay, did you make it to my life?" Every person in this church will have to pass through that needle's eye where my teacher has gone. That we're here this one time is all we know for certain. Shouldn't we be paying more attention to the stations of our journeying? Suddenly, I'm intensely aware of the splashy abstract stained glass, the cross embroidered on the white pall, the tall candle blazing above the casket, the hymnal's red covers, the minister saying something about love's purest joys restored. The honor guard files in to present a flag to the wheelchair-bound widow. A raw wakefulness stands at attention while out on the snowy church sidewalk, the salute is fired, and the trumpeter, a friend and retired professor himself, puts a little extra jazz curlicue on the end of taps in this daylight nation where none can keep an address for long. Okay. All right. Thank you. And I'm going to do one more prose poem. Brush pile sparrows. It's good to have a brush pile in your backyard. Accumulations of last year's stormfall. It's a waist-high sheaf or wave, shapely as if composed. In midwinter, a dozen sparrows make it their home, or if not their home, their base. In daylight, one may see them clumped like thickenings of the top branches, dark beads along the curving roof beams of their stick house. Within the snow-thatched tangle, shelter from wind and predators, shadowy flittings. I leave crumbs and seeds for them on a round concrete slab earmarked for a future garden project. The powder snow on top of it printed by delicate claws. Some say that God got the idea for human beings by observing birds' flight. When I approach, 12 sparrows flutter up into the black walnut tree. They make a kind of visual music, like fingers lightly brushing the strings of a harp. Watching and listening, I feel as though I'm seeing my own soul. Come spring, I'll clear it away, knowing the rain and wind will keep doing their work, and I'll begin to gather up another pile. So, thank you. These are really my piles. All right, let's welcome Ted Tollefson.
Well, as Thomas's poem suggested, the habits of a preacher die hard. And the question behind what I read today is what if what we call poetry is another form of prayer? If so, I invite you, rather than applauding what I say, which makes poetry an object to appreciate, what if instead you turn your attention inward and listen in for wherever the resonance of the poem carries you? So I'd like to open up the ceiling a bit and consider the possibilities that what we are about is a form of prayer and meditation. And all these poems are from my little book called Household of Joy. And it's divided into 3 sections. I'll be reading a few poems from the section that's called Spring Awakening. So if there's any Buddhists in the audience, that's your call, that's your cue. And then there's a couple from Tea and Immortality, which deals with the spiritual dimensions of everyday life. First poem is called Cardinal Calling, which of course is a pun. My mother loved cardinals, and she taught me that love of cardinals and thereby all things with wings. But of course, calling, besides being birdsong, is also another way of talking about our vocation or what calls us to become who we truly are. Cardinal calling. About an hour before dawn, a cardinal starts calling, and no one knows why. Perhaps he feels what's coming and also understands that light can use some encouragement to return to this darkened world. I hear my mother's hymn-singing voice and see her wings of fire calling this world to awaken, to rise and shine and greet the returning light with a song, a kind word, or a blessing. What better way to begin each day than with a song of love inscribed by a familiar hand on the tablets of our heart? So listen in, don't applaud, see where that takes you. This is a poem about moss, and if you walk every day, and I sure hope you do, the moss is beginning to roll out. Moss. The slow march of moss began early this year. Winding green tendrils will soon encircle the meadow in a ring of soft emerald fire. Each patch that grows in the lowly damp places favored by Lao Tzu, Jesus, and fresh dew sprouts its own miniature forest with trees we can barely see. And on some of those winding roads, there are very tiny beings who wander the circular pathways, also seeking runes of order in a disorderly time. May all who walk this good green road discover a song in their hearts and a blessing on their lips. So sometimes prayer is more than bribery, more than flattery. It's an attempt to call something into being, and one of the ways to amplify that call is to gather in a group who are attuned to one another and to the place in which we find ourselves. And if you're following, Kristen and I live in a old maple forest, and the trees unfold in a certain order. This is the time of maples. And on our side of the river, the maple leaves are still tiny, tiny little hands. But give them a week of warm weather and they just open. And then, of course, the whole forest changes. The tiny fingers of maple leaves have escaped from the purple fists that hold and protect them. And now these lacy green and scarlet fingers reach upward for the sky. They probably won't make it, and neither will we. But spring is for dreaming, isn't it? And while they are reaching up and unfurling little flags of a joyful nation, they spread a canopy of light green that provides shade, cool comfort, a little privacy from gawkers, and the serene green light in which we will bathe until leaf tumbling time in late October. And who knows? Maybe they will reach the sky someday. And so, in some fashion, shall we. So you can't keep faith out of poetry. I don't think. And even if you try, it sneaks in and takes over if you're not careful. So this is called Facing the Music. And I think in the 50s, that phrase meant you were being held to account. And you were being forced to notice something that maybe you didn't want to look at. Facing the music. It's spring in our little village of Frontenac. Lilacs are blooming. Morel mushrooms are hiding. Gardeners are on their knees again and again, imploring the good earth for new life. Isn't it time to face the music, which is hidden in every nook and cranny and every leafy edge of the greenwood that we call home? Facing begins by turning towards and tuning in with an attention that is still undivided, not a payment for anything, nor a bribe, but a free and ever renewing gift like dew on uncut grasses. Facing reaches out with a tender hearted imagining that seeks the giver of each song and finds in this two-way interchange a gateway to our common ground. So that's a function of poetry. By one way or another, by one detail or plant or another, to lead us to common ground, where we've been standing all along. And what's happening with your lilacs over on the Wisconsin side? Are they visible yet? And we have microbuds in Frontenac. Lilacs are painting the air again. The young ones, still tight closed buds, favor deep purple and withhold their scent. I think that's about where we are. Next come shades of lavender and sometimes white or pink as they open their hearts to the sky and give their aroma to spring winds. A few lucky ones are gathered by tender hands to become bouquets or lilac jam or fragrant infusions of spring wine. Someday, rust will come, and they will fall to the dark earth near bushes with heart-shaped leaves that gave them life. But their perfume will linger for a few hours or days or even weeks, finding their place in a vessel where love and memory join hands. So for me, almost every poem is an encounter with mortality. And I'm always asking the question, what's the yield? What's the grace and compensation for this all too mortal house of flesh? So Easter came very early this year, which meant that Easter and spring have been desynchronized. I could blame Agent Orange, but I couldn't prove it. So this is called When the Resurrection Comes. When the resurrection comes, it will be trumpeted by daffodils who thrust their sun-colored horns through resistant earth to reclaim their own good news. And they will be accompanied not by pale angels, but more likely the cardinals who can carry a tune with their wings aflame. And when these trumpets sound, there is not much to argue about, but much to wonder about. Ever returning spring for starters, and that song trembling in our hearts, which cardinals and daffodils give back with some help from a huge golden bell tolling across a bright blue sky. If you're not ecstatic in the spring, you may not be awake. And more than one person has noticed that in my book there are about 30, well, there's 25 or 24 spring poems. There's about 16 summer poems, and the next collection will have a winter section, which I am limiting to 11 poems. That's enough. And Kristen and I, between us, have put in over 140 Midwestern winters. So we're going to Florida next winter. Some of our neighbors, and I would guess in many cases yours, include crows. How many of you have crows in your neighborhood? So I thought certainly the crows deserve a poem. And somebody actually published this. I think it was it's in an anthology of animal poems in praise of crows. Crows are holding a conference call from the treetops this morning, and there's a dispute going on about who didn't share yesterday's roadkill or who took more than their fair share. Crows, it's worth noting, like the early Christians, share all things in common, as St. Paul says, including opinions which they share freely and at length. Everybody knows there are recycling crew who offer loud prayers over whatever they find, like priests doing their round in nursing homes. Krista and I worked in a nursing home in River Falls 40 years ago, 30 years ago. But have you noticed they also give advance warning of anything expected in the neighborhood? A strange car on the road, a door left open too late, or someone who does not belong nosing around an empty house. Though crows will never gain the respect of their upper class eagle cousins, we depend upon them utterly and could offer some words of long overdue praise of those who clean up our messes and embody such crafty generosity. So if you have crows, listen up. And as you observe their good work in your neighborhood, why not offer a little praise? The Eagles have plenty. The Cardinals have plenty. I want to end with a poem that comes out of not out of the spring section, but Tea and Immortality. Because let's face it, there's part of our lives, much of our lives, I think, is embedded in the circle of the seasons. But every once in a while, we're struck by something, I hope, that is not about that. So this is called Meditation in a Teacup. And I'm reading from these little Xerox sheets because I can no longer read the 12-point type in my book. Meditation in a Teacup. Vapor trails of jasmine and white peony rising as a teacup descends to my lap, where it warms stiff fingers, reconnecting root and crown. I sit empty-handed, cradling a hollow egg that holds within itself the embryo of almost everything. Lean into this moment. Feel the breath of life rising and falling, settling into this place where nothing is missing, forgotten, or unloved. And my hope is that whatever you do in the morning, even if it involves drinking that other beverage, may it lead you to the place where nothing is missing, forgotten, or unloved. And what better way to begin the day? So let's take a moment and let all of those words return to the ground of silence from which they come. And then what's happening at the end here? Oh, we have an open mic. Yes. Okay. But let's enjoy a moment of blessed silence together. And then I know several people have signed up. We want to hear what you have to say. But let's sit together just for a moment of quiet time. end with the words of a Sufi poet named Rumi, who's now, I believe, one of the most widely read poets in English. And if you doubt this, visit Facebook. May the beauty we love be what we do. There are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the earth. May it be so. And who's our first reader? I know several signed up. We'll leave a big open space up here, and you've got the board.
McDonald.
I'm Barry MacDonald. Odd beauty. Think of the starfish, the seahorse, the octopus. Each has a nervous system attuned to water. Life is a dance of stimulus and response. Amid dangers and needs, an octopus and shark are not friends. The octopus squirts ink to evade the shark. It squeezes a squishy body into coral crevices to escape. So able and creative is the octopus. An octopus rides the back of a little shark. The shark hunts but doesn't know where it is. Certain animals are repulsive. Think of the shock of a tarantula or a rattlesnake. They arouse immediate loathing. Violence is our reaction. There is no grace of aesthetic appreciation. An open minded response escapes us. We are too busy with a thought that follows a thought, an emotion, a problem, a problem. Pressure is a burden on us that compels our attention. From the moment telescopes observed the surface of Jupiter, we have seen a persistent great red spot. The spot is a windstorm with a counterclockwise spin of 250 miles per hour. It waxes and wanes for centuries. It is larger than the Earth. Think of the flamingos of Florida. How odd are their stick legs, queer eyes, and elongated necks. The pink of their feathers is elegant. How beautiful they are. The thoughts of our daily lives are narrowed by compulsions. Our births and deaths are mysteries. Our lives are layered with enigma. Everywhere we look, there is an odd beauty.
Thank you, Barry. Randy Hooper.
First, I'd like to thank our readers. Written poets there are really good. I appreciated them a lot. I'm going to read two poems, one of my own. The first one is written 1913 by a man named Alfred Joyce Kilmer, probably a very well-known speaker of his time and poet. This poem, criticized by some for being simplistic, praised by some for its simplicity. And keeping with the theme of the earth, my favorite earth thing is trees. I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. Um, uh, he wrote this poem and published in his first book. And then in 1918, he was killed in World War I in France at the age of 31. It's a disheartening note to an early young poet of his time. The second poem I'm going to read is one of my own. Um, it started out as just being some words about the fall color season, which I like to note as a leaf song. Viewing the colors is like a song to me. And then it turned into kind of a more of an ode to the tree itself. Thank you for the leaf song. Lovely leaf song. Trees are pals and friends of mine. They'll stand beside you anytime. Protect the earth from wind and rain. They're kings and queens of what remains. Except for fire, they know it's true. They don't know quite just what to do. Living fire draws its life from you. It's always been that way. When I was young, my heart was free. I always liked to climb a tree. Scaling those branches, get real tall. So far below, the world was small. Please let the day just pass me by, wishing the world was satisfied. Then Pa would come and tell me so. It's time to do your chores. Trees release the air we breathe, create some shade to fill our needs. They leave a substance we call wood to build our homes where they once stood. A gift from God, it's plain to see. We are much taller because of thee. There's nothing else quite like a tree. It's always been that way. Even though I've grown and changed, I will tell you, I still feel the same. Trees grow taller and touch the sky. That's all they do until they die. They share their beauty and then they rest. They'll give us all, they bring the best. That's the way it's always been, the way it's always been. That's the way it's always been. Thank you for the lovely leaf song. It brightens up my cloudy days. I was on the road to Rib Lake, Wisconsin, far away. Thank you for the lovely leaf song. Brightened up my cloudy day. Reminded me to enjoy my life before it slips away. Thank you very much.
River? Did you want to stand or do you want the mic down or? Okay. Kim. Okay, Kim will fix the.
So, hi everyone, I'm all low here. Can you see me? Or do you want me to come over here? There we go. Now I can see everybody. Oh, I don't know how I'm gonna do that.
Would you like me to hold it or?
Would that be weird?
It's fine with me. It's
Okay,
fine with
that's
you.
right. So I published my my memoir finally. How long it's been. It's snapshots, still standing snapshots of an MS warrior. And on May 16th, at the Swinging Bridge Brewery downtown at 7 p.m. I'm going to have it at book release party. So that'll be on the 16th of May, the Swinging Bridge. So I'm going to read one poem from here. It's about the woods to me. Can't see up close. It's called Woodsy Escape. I taste the air of times past as she walks and I ride along the tar-covered trail lined of birch and pine. A distant hum echoes softly in the breeze as I tell her a story of another time, walking with Willow on my back, a leash in both hands, a big dog on each end. We were headed towards our woodsy escape to find freedom for them and renewal for me. They say bones hum their songs, while trees whisper our secrets, rivers gather the stories rocks are sure to safe keep. Tears swell as my wheels stop on the man-made ground. These are not the woods I know. I am not the same woman anymore. Oh, beep that. Balance or no balance. I need to feel the earth between my toes. It's time she rides and I push. We stop at the next deer trail and safely trade places. Smiling, I tell her, this is the only way. I sit down upon the earth and crawl to the open ground. Let the renewal begin. Sorry about the beep in there. It has my only swear word I have in any poems, basically. And I realized I thought of that. And I was like, oh, I better not say it. So we could all guess what it was, though. Thank you. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks.
Thank you. Uh, and Krista.
Hi, everybody. Well, I thought for this reading, I'd like to read something by Gary Snyder. The title of the event tonight, Earth Household, was the title of one of Gary Snyder's books. So this is from one of his books called Axe Handles. Gary Snyder's still living. He's got to be in his 90s now. Is that right? He's been around for a long time, a Western poet. This is called For All. Ah, to be alive on a mid-September morn, fording a stream, barefoot, pants rolled up, holding boots, pack on, sunshine, ice in the shallows, northern Rockies. Rustle and shimmer of icy creek waters, stones turn underfoot, small and hard as toes, cold nose dripping, singing inside, creek music, heart music, smell of sun on gravel. I pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the soil of Turtle Island and to the beings that thereon dwell. One ecosystem in diversity under the sun with joyful interpenetration for all.
And Kaylee.
Hi. Yeah, lot of most of my poetry is inspired by nature. So I have a couple, 2, 3, maybe a couple short ones. I'd like to read. They all relate to what I've heard this, and I want to add to that celebration. I don't know if I can find where I am. Here it is. It's a short. It's called "Ode to Dead Trees." Holy bones of trees lay on altars of leaves, or stand reaching heavenwards in final acts of adoration. Relics of shelter for birds and shade from the sun, evoking wonder once at their large leafy domes that made hallow these woods. I sing praise at your broken nakedness as you continue to feed me with your beauty. Turn the mic up. Oh, okay. It sounds really loud here, but it's not out there. Okay. This is deep voices. The paths are shorter now and often change direction. Maybe because time is accelerating as a life of journeys rambles towards rest. I was on the last path for only a day or two. It veered right, then left, parallel to the one I had just been on. I don't deliberate or second guess so much anymore. My lawn is on a path less intentional. Indian paintbrush, orange as flames in a ring of fire, and patches of yellow buttercups have shown up like crop circles, alien yet indigenous. The art has found its own way after years of purpose and direction from fertilizer and grass seed, weeding and mowing, much like I find my way now, moving to a nudge deep in my dirt. And then just one, it's kind of a prose poem. Prose poem. There we go. Yeah, so much of nature, I feel for the younger generations, and part of my purpose is to pass appreciation for nature to my grandkids. Just remind them that there's more world out there than phones. That's it. It's called Passing the Torch. A winter ago, I made a trail up the steep wooded hill behind my house. I stomped the deep snow with my sorrel boots, sidestepping a nearly perpendicular trajectory for the shortest and fastest way to the top until I noticed the deer tracks. How they zigged and zagged and wound uphill in no particular hurry. I followed their trails day after day, making them my own. In summer, the grandchildren explored the trails, now marked by trampled grasses and dead leaves. 2 fallen trees shaped in a V at the top became their house, and they set mushrooms, leaves, flowers, and bark in the rotted out joints where branches had been. They explored the circular path on top, around trees pocked with holes made by woodpeckers winter foraging. I taught them how to discern poison ivy from a look-alike 3-leaved plants, and the name for the shrub that snatched at their clothes and bit their skin, buckthorn. Last winter, a broken foot had me sidelined from trail mark making, and I'd sit looking out the window at the woods, at the deer and the turkeys going up and down, following the old trail, or not. At Christmas, a grandson watching 2 turkeys move into the woods yelled, "Grandma, they're following the trail you made." They were, and they weren't. It's early spring again. I'm still nursing a gimpy foot and sit on a log at the bottom of the hill.
as two grandchildren explore for the first time. I tell them how the path zigs and zags and shout out directions as they move further uphill and get off path. And then I stop. It is time they make their own trails. But I will teach them, when it gets warmer, how to recognize poison ivy. Thank you.
So was there anyone who wanted to read who did not sign up? Last chance. All right. Well, I will close this out with a poem then. I fully intended to write something of my own, but it just was not coming together. So I'm going to read somebody else's poem instead. So this is an excerpt from a longer poem called Friday the 13th, which was read by Allen Ginsberg at the first Earth Day celebration in Fairmount Park, Philadelphia. I've kind of hacked it apart, so we'll see how this goes. Oh, how beautiful snowy fields, earth floored below cloud holes, glimpsed from air roads, smogged through heavens toward Illinois. What right have I to eat petrol guns and metal from earth heart? What right have I to burn gas air, screech over ground, rubber tired, round midnight stoplight corners in Peoria, Fort Wayne, Ames? What prayer restores freshness to eastern meadow, soil to cindered acres, hemlock to rusty hillside, transparency to Passaic streambed, blue whale multitudes to coral gulfs? Earth pollution identical with mind pollution, consciousness pollution identical with filthy sky. Dirty thoughted usury simultaneous with metal dust in watercourses. Murder of great and little fish, same as self-besmirchment, short hair thought control. Mace repression of Gnostic street boys identical with DDT extinction of bald eagle. Mother's milk poisoned as father's thoughts, all greed stained over the automobile designing table. What can poetry do? How flowers survive? How man see right mind multitude? Hear his heart's music, feel cockjoys, taste ancient, natural grain bread and sweet vegetables. Smell his own baby body's tender neck skin. When 60% state money goes to heaven on gas clouds burning off war machine smokestacks, when violence floods the state from above, flowery land raised for robot proliferation, metal rooted and asphalted down 6 feet below topsoil. Slaves of plastic, leather shoe chino pants prisoners, haircut junkies, Dacron sniffers, striped tie addicts, short hair monkeys on their backs. Whiskey freaks bombed out on 530 billion cigarettes a year. $20 billion advertising dealers, lipstick skin poppers, and syndicate garbage telex heads. Star-striped scoundrel-esque flag dopers. Car smog hookers fiendish on superhighways. Growth rate trippers hallucinating Everglade real estate. Steak swallowers zonked on television. Old ladies on stock market habits. Old Wall Street paper money pushers. How long this addict government support our oil burner matter habit? Shooting gasoline electric speed before the blue light blast and eternal police roar mankind's utter bust. Robot airfields, soulless market, electronic intelligence business skyscraper streets, empty souled, exploding. Sheer matter cracking, disintegrating back to void. Samsara tears itself apart. Thank you, everyone.